Max Ivy, thanks so much for coming on the Inner Edison podcast. I appreciate you being here today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to having a great talk with you and seeing if we can't educate your audience a little bit today.
All right, what do you want to educate them on? Because you're raring to go. You're such a so first, for most people who aren't watching, they wouldn't know that you're a blind person. And how long you been blind? Your whole life, or
Yeah, I started losing my vision when I was about 5 to retinitis pigmentosa. I had gradual vision loss until I entered junior high school, and then I had a big drop off in vision, and it stayed current until I went off to college, and now it's what it is now. It's been what it is now since 1990 or 91, and I have no functional vision. I can't see colors, shapes, or shadows. I can see light, but only if I look directly at where the light source is supposed to be. So, no peripheral vision. But yeah, I am blind, and you know, uh, and it for the longest time it was a big part of what I did because I was one of the few people who was blind that people online knew of as a creative entrepreneur. There wasn't a lot of us back in 2007, 2009. It's which is how I became, which is one of the reasons why people still refer to me as the blind blogger, because it was a nickname they used on LinkedIn and Facebook that just stuck. So and it's
you've been uh, getting the word out for a while now, because you said 2013 you started doing podcasts.
I did my first podcast interview in February 2013. So what does that mean? I've been doing it over 10 years now as a guest. I've been doing it since 2016 as a host, not every week, just in case people are thinking I'm a super person. Uh, and I just recently got a gig where I'm now the one of the paid hosts for Hearsay Shorts, which is produced by Audio Eye. So I'm now getting paid to do interviews, which is not something a lot of podcasters get to do. It's not something I ever expected doing. But then I didn't realize I was an expert on accessibility until about 4 years ago. And basically, I was minding my own business. I sent a thank you note to somebody on LinkedIn, and they said, Mr. Ivey, we think we have a job for you. We want you to come to work for Audio Eye. And I argued with them. I told them I was only half qualified for the job, but they convinced me to fill out an application. And then when I wasn't qualified for the job, they invited me to use my storytelling ability to share knowledge and experience about accessibility on their platform. And that led to getting hired by Alex Sanfilippo at Podmatch. He's one of my clients where I advise him on accessibility for his platform. It also led to me getting invited to write for a couple other publications. So like I say, about 4 years ago, I was trying to get to know more people in the disability community, not expecting this would be my future, and here it is. So, and of course, being me, I have to have a unique approach to accessibility because, as I'm sure you know, most people in this field are about compliance, fear, uh, legal actions. They want to scare people into making their products, services, and content more inclusive. Whereas my whole approach is I like to take a non-threatening, collaborative approach where we look at where somebody is right this minute and figure out what they need to do and what they can do, and then work through the process and make their product or their service or their website more accessible as they go along. And in some cases, in the short term, I have had to let website owners do things on their site for me. In some cases, I've had to create workarounds and then communicate those workarounds to other people using that site while the website or app developers were working on making it more accessible. And I'm one of these people, I really believe that anything we do online is a process. I mean, it isn't a destination, it isn't perfection. We'll never get to 100% inclusion, no matter whether we're talking about a disability or we're just talking about user experience in general. But as long as we continue to make the sincere effort, then we'll get close enough. And the people who have a problem with it will be able to have a conversation with them, address their issues, find solutions, and move on. So that's what my unusual take on this field. And as I'm sure you're aware, it's become a lot more in demand lately over the last few years. I'm very happy that there are more speaking, writing, and podcast interview opportunities to talk about this stuff.
Well, I think people don't realize the accessibility issue that there is out there because they don't think of the challenges that other people have. They, and please don't, this is not supposed to come off wrong, like people don't think about other people, but a lot of times we don't. We just think about what we need, not about access for other people. So, I mean, how are you? So, if I have a website out there, is there a aren't most websites accessible for you? I mean, because I assume you use a reader to read the website. Is that what we're talking about?
Right. Yeah. So I use a screen reader. Other people with more vision than I have use screen magnification. They either have a physical magnifier or they use one of the apps. Some people that have limited motor function use mechanical switch devices. So the depending on what type of a disability you're talking about, it can even be intellectual or developmental. Only about 5% of the internet is considered to be accessible at this point. Most of it has some challenges, and a lot of those challenges are things like you said, the website owner just didn't think about. And it isn't that they tried to make things harder on a certain group of people. It's just, as a business owner, as a website owner, you've got so many other things that you have to do that you're familiar with doing, that this one other thing is something you just don't think about unless you know somebody personally or unless you are connected with somebody who makes this their passion. And then it becomes something you'll think about. But yes, a lot of the internet is not accessible. For example, one of the biggest problems I run into is that most people building websites don't realize that people like me don't have access to a mouse. And since I don't have access to a mouse, a lot of the functions that developers take for granted when they're building websites just don't apply to me. And I can't tell you how many times I've gotten to the end of a form, say like a shopping cart where I was trying to buy something. And after spending 15 or 30 minutes or sometimes an hour, I wasn't able to click that last button because it was not built for people who navigate the internet using the keyboard approach.
Wow. I don't think people think about it. Again, it's
they don't. And that's
wrong. It's just, it's not, so I'm glad that you're out there doing this so people understand what we need to do. Because I can tell you right now, there's so many things I deal with that you have to use a mouse for everything. You couldn't use your keyboard, because I've had it where I've lost my mouse and I needed to use the keyboard, and you're like, how come I can't just hit, and I don't use it. I could just see the frustration that you would go through because of the way things are set up. There has anybody put together a quick workaround to where, like, okay, just, use this code, drop this in here, and this is how you can do it? I mean, someone had to come up with something like that.
Well, unfortunately, in the current version of the online world, that has to be done by each individual website owner. So, like, for example, we're meeting on StreamYard. I don't know what the StreamYard commands are because I don't use it often enough, but I'm sure that they have either they have a resource, or when you use your arrow keys to move around, there'll be some pop-ups or something where you can find out what keyboard commands make it do certain other things. Zoom was really the leader in creating keyboard options and making the list of keyboard options available to users. And thankfully, most of the other online meeting platforms have embraced their approach. But usually it's a website by website or app by app thing. It's not something that's universal. Just like one thing that would be really cool would be if the alternative text tags, which are tags that people add to their images so screen readers know they're there, it would be really cool if you only had to add those tags to your image, and that then those tags would follow your image wherever you posted that image. But as it stands right now, you have to create a description of each image. And every time you post that image, say you got 5 social media platforms, each one of those platforms, you'll have to either write that description or copy and paste that description for each image. Now, I hear that Adobe is working on something using the XREF tags and images where maybe 5 to 10 years from now, you'll be able to just write one description when you create an image on your camera or your device, and it will follow those images all over the world, all over the internet, but that isn't the case right now. So a lot of it is site by site. People have to do it on their own. And some of the website building options are doing a better job at prompting people, reminding them of some things they should do or not do when it comes to creating an accessible website. So it's very challenging. Like I say, it would be great if there was, you could do this one thing and it would take care of everything. But as it stands right now, even the automation options, even the available artificial intelligence options, they only get a certain percentage of accessibility correct. And in most cases, they end up creating more problems than they solve. And that's even for stuff like Waves or AudioEye, where the automated process was developed with input from people with disabilities. It's it's one of those things. I know in our world today, we think somebody should be able to come up with a cheat code that would automatically fix them all, but that just ain't possible.
Well, not yet anyway. I mean, but I mean, because for you, I mean, you've been dealing with this for a while, and luckily everything's gotten better, right? I assume
Yes.
it's not as
Yeah.
bad. Yeah, because I mean, I can only imagine in 1990 and the early 2000 how bad it was to even go online if you couldn't see
Right.
anything.
And in 2007, when I built my first website, there was no WordPress. Drupal was relatively new. My best option for creating a website at that time as a blind person who couldn't afford to pay somebody to do it for him was either creating a MySpace page or learning to code HTML. So I taught myself to code, and I coded my website one line at a time for the first 5 years that I was online, and was very happy when WordPress came along. But since Gutenberg, WordPress isn't as accessible as it used to be. There are a lot of things that have become more complicated than they need to be. And I'm one of many people in the disability community that's looking around for a replacement to WordPress or somebody to develop more accessible themes for WordPress, because this what does they call it? The full service editor that they've gone to in their last generation is very, very challenging for people using adaptive technology. There's a few themes that are better than the basic version of WordPress, but even that isn't really helping a lot. And I used to love talking about WordPress because not only was it accessible, and it still is mostly, but they invested and they still invest a lot of time and money in making it as accessible as possible. But since Gutenberg, since the blocks, since like I say the full service editor now, it is much more confusing and time consuming to use it.
So what do you do? I mean, I have a question. I mean, how do
what you do is you spend a lot more time doing stuff that you used to be able to do more quickly, and you try not to have to fix things or change things. So, like in my week, the worst thing I have to do is if, say, I decide that I need to add a new page to the main menu on one of my websites. That's not fun. The other thing you can do is you can hire somebody, or you can recruit people, family or friends who are better at working with that stuff than you are, and let them do it for you. I probably have 5 people now in my circle who have administrator accounts on my WordPress sites, just so that if I need them to help me, I don't have to create an admin for them. They've already got one, and there's a couple people, including the lady who edits my books, who have admin accounts on my Kindle publishing and my Audible accounts. Same reason, because sometimes it's just a real time waste to do it yourself if you have a disability. And one of the things that just actually got worse for me is, for the longest time, I was a user of Mad Mimi for my email provider. Most people that have a podcast or a blog, they've got an email list, and they use a program like MailChimp or Constant Contact or something like that. Well, I was using Mad Mimi because it was a very simple, minimalist approach to having a mail server. And they were recently bought out by GoDaddy, and GoDaddy has a very bad history in the area of accessibility. So I'm not really looking forward to seeing what GoDaddy does with Mad Mimi. And so while I try to figure out what my next mail client will be, if I have one, I'm currently using a LinkedIn newsletter, because sending out stuff in a LinkedIn newsletter is easier than going through the learning curve, as well as doing the search to find versions of mail programs to try out. It's more than I have time to invest in right this minute. So
have you tried high level?
Have I tried what?
Go high level. GHO.
It's interesting you ask about high level, because I don't want to get either of us in any trouble. All right.
Well, I just know I mean it's a huge thing right now. They're being pushed. They have their conference coming up in a few weeks. I just didn't. I mean, they use I think for websites they use WordPress. I think inside their stuff. But go ahead. I mean, not getting in trouble. People want to know because accessibility. I want to know.
Okay. All right. Here's the thing. The way I came in contact with them is through their calendar widget, because I do a lot of podcast interviews and I schedule them, and most everybody has their own calendar. Well, I have found that the calendar widget that they created, that people are using on systems they developed with that company, that it's just not accessible. It doesn't work in Safari. It doesn't work on my phone or my tablet. It just barely works in Chrome. And I really don't like anything that forces me to switch from Safari to Chrome or vice versa to use a particular website or app. So I've exchanged messages with people at the C-level. I've had exchanges with their tech people, telling them what they need to do with the calendar.
Have you talked to the owners?
I've talked to the co-founders. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So I've been following the chain through and speaking to other people in the company, and I haven't yet gotten any of the improvements that I recommended to them for the calendar. And the calendar, as you know, is just a very small part of a huge program that they offer that does dozens, if not hundreds, of different functions for people that use them. So
So you had a problem with my calendar then, because that's through high level.
Did I have a problem with your? I think I did.
I think because you said it was. I think in the beginning you said you couldn't use it or get on it or whatever. I didn't know at the time that you were blind. I apologize. I'm just used to people who sometimes are lazy. I didn't mean it was you. You know how sometimes people are. And you know how people are.
I love honesty. I love a guy who isn't afraid to just say stuff like that.
I'm a vet, dude. I'm very direct. So
I appreciate that 100%. I'm one of these people. I prefer blind over visually impaired, just as an example. So, but I can totally get that some people would just, if it isn't really super easy, they're like, oh, I'll just get him to do it for me. But yeah, in my case, I did have trouble. I did eventually find out that you can do it in Chrome. It's not fun, mainly because they use a search box instead of a select box. And a search box is one of the things in forms that it's just so easy to mess it up, to make it where it's difficult to select the item you want the first time. And the more times I have to select something or select a return in a search box, the more I just go, do I really need to be here? I get to that point after 4 or 5, 6 tries. So like I said, I did find out that I can do it in Chrome. It's not easy. And the thing with their calendar, at least as it is right now, most of the time I just take the date that the owner has as the one they would prefer me to use, unless I just absolutely can't do that date, because it's easier than changing it.
Wow. Now I know. Because how is Calendly for you?
I love Calendly.
Calendly works. I used to use them, but I had to have 4 accounts for 4 different podcasts.
Yeah, I understand. It does have its limitations. It's probably another example of something that works great for me, because things that are simply designed and have a minimalist approach work really well for me. There did used to be a problem with Calendly for the longest time. The front end worked great, but the back end was a nightmare. For up until, I'd say, maybe 18 months ago, you could schedule appointments on somebody else's Calendly, but you couldn't set up your own Calendly. And thankfully, they did finally fix that in the app, and then eventually they fixed it in the the desktop version as well. So I enjoy it, but just like I don't feel like I should have to go to some other platform to use a particular website. I don't feel like I should make somebody else do the same on the other side. But yeah, their calendar, the high value calendar, has not been fun. Calendly is really good. I find Tidy Cow can be quirky the first time you use it, but if you can get it synced up with whatever calendar you're using, after then it works fine. But getting it configured the first time can take several tries. It's just a lot of the stuff that happens for me is more challenging. And this is one of the things I'm glad we've kind of veered off into this subject, because one of the things that I wish more people would realize is that when they address accessibility, that most of the time they're also going to improve the user experience for everybody that doesn't have a disability.
And again, like I said in the beginning, I think just people don't even think about this, and we should. I mean, we think about accessibility into our buildings and other stuff, but we don't think about accessibility to our website, which I'm definitely going to see what I need to make changes to, especially my personal one. So,
well, I appreciate it. That's the thing. I
want to make it easier for people to find me.
Well, that's exactly it. That's what I want. I want more people thinking, man, I'm making it hard for over 60 million Americans or over 1 billion people in the world to find me. That's not something most of us want to do.
Is that how many people are visually impaired or blind?
No, that's how many people who are disabled in total. And I understand that, accessibility is very challenging because you're having to deal with multiple platforms and multiple disabilities and a variety of adaptive technology. But it's figured that about 1 billion globally and about 60 million in the US alone. I don't happen to have the percentage of that number that is visually impaired, but I'll work on it for you.
I appreciate that. No, I like numbers. I'm in the mortgage industry.
All right,
so I'm into numbers. Yeah.
Okay, I got a number you're going to love. The Department of Commerce says last year the disability community accounted for $21 billion in the economy.
So that's a lot of money.
I don't know. Is 20 billion a lot of money anymore? I don't
know. We give it away like it's nothing.
Yeah. Here's another stat that I know you're going to love. Companies that are willing to invest in accessibility in their products and their marketing, they will generally see 1.7 times growth in sales as opposed to companies that don't invest in accessibility, and as much as 4.1 times the profit of companies that don't invest in accessibility.
So all right? So let's talk about that. So basically, our websites need to have better for certain types of people to be able to access them. Is that built into the stuff, or what you were saying about WordPress? If you have a website in WordPress, it sounds to me like it's not as accessible as it used to be. Is that what I heard? Is that just for you to use? It's not as accessible.
Right. Yes. On the back end, creating and managing my own websites within WordPress, it's not as accessible as it used to be. I would say that for most people creating a website, say the only purpose of their website is a blog or a very small number of sales items, say for an author or maybe somebody who's just getting started, the odds are they're going to do a decent job with accessibility. It's one of those things that it can really sneak up on you and get worse as you scale. So with more websites or with more complicated websites, I mean, if all they have is a blog and they're using WordPress, the worst thing they're probably going to mess up is not having the alt text description on their images or not using headings. But at least the headings part of it is something that they would know to do anyway, because it's recommended as from the point of view of being a writer. So, but some of the things that, beyond the alternative text, some of the things people need to think about is the font. You want to choose a font that, when it's expanded due to magnification, doesn't blur the letters. So you're looking for a font that's simple and has space between the letters, between the words, and between lines.
Is there a better font Is there like
Yeah, I like 12 times Roman. Basically, the fancier the font, the more likely it is you're going to cause trouble. And then, of course, your color contrasts. The higher the contrast, the better. So, black on white, black on yellow is good. Giving people the option to invert the text, because quite often white on a black background is actually easier to read for some people. And then the more color options you can give people, the better for people who have dyslexia or learning disabilities, because quite often the color combinations will vary as to what makes it easy for them to comprehend what they're reading on your website. You want to make sure your links, your buttons, and anything that causes another action on your website is built to work with a keyboard or a mouse. And I would say the one thing that gets more people in trouble than anything else is their forms. So if you're not 100% sure you can create an accessible form, then don't do it. Use Google Forms. Use one of the other 2 or 3, really well-respected forms building options, because most of the time they're not going to steer you wrong. And if there's things beyond those that you're wanting to try, select boxes, tables, tabs, the W3C website has some great stuff on helping you figure out how to make those accessible if you're wanting to do it on your own. You can use Waves or AudioEye's website to check your existing site and see how you're doing and get some suggestions for improvements. You can reach out to somebody who does it for a living like I do. And in some cases, depending on where you live, you can actually get help from some of the advocacy groups in the disability community.
Well, I'll be making some changes on mine. I really appreciate you being on the show today, Max, and getting me to understand what needs to be done, and other people who have websites and other stuff to help it make it more accessible for people online to be able to see their stuff. I appreciate that.
Well, I appreciate that. And just one last thing I want to share with podcasters, especially. I need your help here because I was a little rushed today myself. What color shirt am I wearing?
Blue.
Okay. So for podcasters, as you mentioned when we started, people won't be able to know that I'm blind, because they may or may not be able to see what we're recording here, or not realize I'm blind from me being on camera. So the vast majority of people who will consume your podcast are going to do it in audio. So basically, your listening audience may as well be blind. So one of the things you could do to help your audience better connect with you and follow along on the audio that you're creating is to do what's called an audio description. That's where you tell people what you look like, what you're wearing, your background. And so, like for me, I am a 58-year-old Caucasian male, a rather large man with medium-length brown curly hair, brown eyes. I'm wearing a blue button-down dress shirt with a black tie. I'm sitting in a generic office chair in my bedroom, which is also my recording space. And I have the background blurred out. And as I mentioned earlier in the interview, I have retinitis pigmentosa and only light perception and very limited peripheral vision. Now, for people that are doing their own descriptions, your background, if it's unique or if it's changed since the last time you recorded, describe that. Most people love to hear about your cute dogs, cats, and other characters from your show that maybe weren't intended to be characters of your show. So letting people know about those can be helpful. And if something happens in the middle of the show where you or your guest have some sort of important physical reaction, then you can describe that for your audience. And the more they feel like they know what's going on, the more immersive your presentation is, the stronger connection you're going to make, the more loyal of an audience you're going to have. And I firmly believe it will help people grow their audiences faster if they think about creating inclusive content as well as having inclusive websites.
All right, we'll do that. Max, thank you so much for being on the show today. I really appreciate you being here. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate getting to spend some time with you, and I look forward to talking to you again sometime.
Sounds good. We'll make it happen.